Welcome to SolFul Connections, where we skip the small talk and head right into the soul talk. I'm Amanda Solar, and each week we share the kinds of stories that remind us we're not alone. It's about being human, raw and unfiltered, just real talk. Let's connect.
Connection.
Well, today I have Blaine Greenfield, and I had the wonderful experience of being a guest on Blaine's World, which is Blaine's podcast. So now he is, kind of returning the favor, so to speak. Blaine is on my podcast. Blaine identifies as Chief Encouragement Officer. And I feel like that says a lot about your approach to life, Blaine. So, first of all, let's just start out by saying, why Chief Encouragement Officer?
It's funny, I didn't come up with that on my own. A student did, former student, and he said that, boy, Blaine, you're a Chief Encouragement Officer, and it just hit me. It's just, and I call it CEO, Chief Encouragement Officer, because that's what I like doing. I like encouraging people.
I love that a student said that because, that says a lot about you. If a student can view you as an encourager, that says everything, right? So, Blaine, before we dive in, just can you share what is something that pops up from either your week or the day that made you smile recently?
That's a good question, Amanda. And that certainly made me smile. Being asked that question made me smile. We just got a dog, and so that's making me smile. And the fact that the dog is getting along with our cat, which is really pleasantly surprising. So I think that's making me smile a lot.
Congratulations. What's the dog's name?
Bodhi,
Cute.
like the Bodhi tree, Bodhi.
Oh,
And
nice.
I never had a dog. Most people had dogs all their life, and so at my age to get a dog was quite an experience, and I'm getting used to it.
I think it's a good thing. I always say dogs on paper make no sense, but they just don't. But there's something about them that is so, I don't know, it makes your life better.
Well, it's funny you said that because that's one of the things we're working on. That the dog is now pretty well trained. He hadn't been trained when we got him, and we're still debating, Amanda. Can we get him to go on at least sometime pee pads, on paper? Because I saw it the other day. We only had the dog a couple of months, and it's nice weather. So just yesterday was the first really bad day with heavy rain and winds, at least here. And so if we can actually get him to also at times go inside or on paper, I don't know if we'll be able to do so, but that would really make me smile.
Well, good luck with that. My dog, I remember the pee pads in the early days of my dog training, and my dog was born like outside in a cemetery, so was not used to anything. And all she would do with the pee pads is eat them. And that wasn't good for anybody. It wasn't good for her, wasn't good for us, wasn't good for the floor, so. But you know what? I wish you better luck.
Well, they say, the whole idea. So we're used to walking outdoors and we have a good place to walk it, even though we have a beautiful yard, but he doesn't want to go in our yard. So he wants to go in the neighbor's yard. But on a cold, windy day, we'll see, but I'm not holding my breath. So that would make it.
Well, if he's really small, he could go like in a litter box.
Right. Well, we've actually talked about it. The cat does. And it's funny because he eats the cat's food a lot. The cat eats his food a lot. And that would be great, but I don't know if we'll ever see that happen.
Hey, you never know. Okay, so the other thing that you call yourself that really struck me was you said you were a rewirement expert in training. And I kind of love rewirement as opposed to retirement. Can you share what that means?
Sure. So the same kind of thing that happened a while ago didn't get this from a student, but when I retired, I didn't want to say I was retiring, and so one of the things I tried to do in my life, Amanda, and hopefully you do it, and I think you do, and a lot of people, is don't look forward to retirement. I didn't want to retire. I didn't want to stop doing stuff. And so one of the things I did, which I think unusual, was I kind of researched this and thought about it a long time before I retired. So I kind of had a plan in my mind. There's a great book you can encourage your listeners to check out too. And the premise was rewire, not retire. The name of the book is Rewire, Not Retire. The premise just really hit me. I said, wow, I read that maybe 5 years before I retired. I said, that's what I want to do. I don't want to retire. I want to have stuff to do. And so my wife was amazed, and she talks about it, that I actually at times am busier retired than when I was working,
Yeah.
So I always have, which I think is important for people to have, a lot of different things to do, And it seems like, by the way, you seem to do that too. When you left the chamber, you seem to certainly find stuff to keep yourself busy. And
Yeah.
I think it's so important, Amanda, but I think it's important for people to think about it before they retire, and kind of have a plan, because contrast that with another former friend of mine, and when he retired, all he did was sit on the couch all day and watch TV, and he stopped doing anything and didn't last that much longer. And his wife was always upset by that fact because he had no plan. So rewirement, not retire. And I called myself a rewirement expert in training because it took me a while, but not a long time, to get into my routine. And it's great.
I love that. And the book, which I think they made, I haven't watched it, but I think they made it into a documentary, but I did read the book, The Blue Zones. Have you seen
Sure.
that?
Yeah,
Read that?
exactly.
He positions that the two most dangerous times of life are birth and retirement.
Interesting.
I think for just that reason. And I think what you're also talking about is a sense of purpose, which you kind of probably should be exploring all throughout your life, because having your sense of, why am I waking up in the morning? What am I excited about? What am I looking forward to doing? I think that gives our life meaning, and that's really powerful.
Well, I was lucky. Shortly after we moved to Asheville, the author of that book came to Asheville to speak, and I was very impressed. And one of the things he did was so cool, Amanda. He had a woman in the audience, 100 years old, and she came up on stage, and she was still vibrant, she was still active. Your point being, she had a sense of purpose. I guess that's for all of us. By the way, as we talk, I do have the book in front of me, if I can share it with you.
Sure.
I encourage your readers. It's called Don't Retire, Rewire. And it's by two guys. It's Sedler and Miners. It's Jerry Sedler, Sedlar, and Rick Miners, Miners. Don't Retire, Rewire. And to show you how well it's received, it's in its third edition. So
Nice.
it's just a really good book. But that was my whole premise. I didn't want to retire. I wanted to have stuff to do. And I found stuff to do. That's the key.
What's the kind of stuff that you're working on right now? So I know it's the podcast, Blaine's World.
Well, more importantly, I walk my dog now.
Yeah.
That's
Which
become,
is actually important.
I hear it's become, at least an hour a day, if not longer, a couple times a day. It's interesting you ask that question, that what I'm working on. So I always have things I'm working on. So I do my podcast, that's several hours a day sometimes, but I'm always working on the podcast. I also have a blog, and that really keeps me busy. The blog, somebody asked me how long do I spend on that? That's sometimes 10, 20 hours a week, just putting it together. And so one of the things, and I think you and I have this in common, I love sharing information. I love sharing information. I love sharing information with other people. And by the way, I'll thank you for something. But you shared one of your guests with me, and I just interviewed him yesterday. The name is, the doctor is, who am I talking about?
Mark Lund.
Mark Lund, and we'll give a shout out to Mark Lund. But it was so much fun speaking to him. So thank you for the contact. But it's just great to meet him and then exchanging ideas with him. And so I love doing that. I love exchanging it like you and I are doing. It's incredible. We met last week and already had 27 emails back and forth. It's just, and I thank you so much. You gave me him as a person to interview. And it's just such a great interview, and I felt I had so much fun with him, and I felt inspired by him. But that's what I really enjoy, to meet people. And then on top of that, Amanda, one of the things I do is I then like sharing, with people, so that you and I did it right away. We just knew it. I said we had
Yes.
this talk and already we're sharing with each other. With Mark and I just had that talk yesterday, and I just put it on my on the internet, and it's just such a good interview. There's so many ideas we bounce off each other, and it's just so much fun to talk about that. I love that, to speak to somebody. Like, I love your question. What are you smiling about? What makes you happy?
Yeah.
I love finding out from people, what are they doing? What's he doing? And with Mark, it was so interesting that he took what I thought was could have been a dry topic for some people and made it fascinating,
Yeah.
and here I were talking how anybody can apply it, to their lives. So that's sort of what I work on. I'll speak to somebody. Now I'm starting to do a lot of reviews of shows I see. So I'll see a show, I like reviewing it for others to see and to encourage. So I'm always working on something.
Yeah. I think creativity is maybe even underestimated by people, because there is something really joyful about the act of creating. You and I kind of like to write, and we like to engage with words. I think somebody might like to create recipes, or, do home decor, whatever it is. There's some sort of power, I think, in putting something out there that wasn't there before, or engaging with somebody and then collaborating and creating. That's what you and Mark did,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like collaborative opportunities or ways you meet. And one of the things I did today too, with a mutual friend. So after he and I talked, I'm trying to network him with Kevin Jameson, a mutual friend. And so that's just cool. If I can then help you meet somebody else. Back to your other point, was a good one, I think, about creativity. And so for a lot of years, I actually had a creativity course at Bucks County Community College.
Oh, I know that.
And I love teaching it. And one of the things I loved about it, the biggest thing I had to work with people on is that they would say they're not creative. I'm not creative. And that's so incorrect. And we're all creative, but the more we put a negative out there, it's not going to make us creative. So if you want to believe you're not creative, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm a creative person, I have lots of ideas, and I like sharing those ideas. And so that's one of the things I do like doing. I like sharing ideas and concepts.
So did you teach for 35 years?
Yeah, probably longer than that. It was amazing, Amanda. Sort of what I said to you when we interviewed. Like you, I started, I think, when I was 7. I was
Yes.
the
Yeah. We're
youngest,
babies. Blaine.
the youngest full professor at Bucks County Community College. So I started a long time ago, and I wound up being there full time for like about 35 years, and part time, I think, for another 5. But it's just incredible. It's like overnight.
Yeah.
It was a long time. But yeah, I taught for a long time, and I enjoyed it. It's a fun thing to do.
What did teaching teach you?
Another good question. Let me think about it. I'm the one who usually asks questions, Amanda. So,
I know. You know what, Blaine? It's so funny because sometimes I ask people questions and I think if they flipped this switch and asked me, I don't know if I would have the answer.
that's what I was going to ask you before we started. I said, it's okay if I ask you questions, because I oftentimes do that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd always get ideas from my students. What did I learn? I hope to be a better listener, than I was. I learned, and you and I think talked briefly about this, that teaching, I switched, and this is a big switch, and it's applicable to salespeople as well, to stop doing most of the talking. I think we talked about this in your interview. Instead of teaching 90% of the time, and students talk 10% of the time, I tried to reverse it if I can. So that's maybe one of the biggest things I learned, that when I was teaching, I didn't have to do all the talking. And
Yeah.
so I oftentimes did that. That I never, one of the things I never did, I never lectured per se. People say about, I hated PowerPoints because I hated talking off PowerPoints. And I
Yeah.
got almost like you and I talking. If I had come to you now So we're going to talk about these 17 points, Amanda. I much enjoy
Right.
this discussion rather than having to hit each of these points. So that's maybe, I never realized it until you asked the question, but that's maybe one of the biggest shifts. I read about with salespeople. I saw it in teaching, I saw it in life, I saw it in relationships as well. If you can talk, I don't think we talked about this, but with your work in the chamber, I would tell people when you meet somebody the first time in networking, let them do the talking, and ask them questions and get them talking about themselves rather than most do instructions. They talk most of the time about themselves. I'd rather talk about you. So that's teaching.
That's a good tip. And I think people do that because they think that's what you're supposed to do. They think, okay, now here's my chance. I'm talking and I have to sell whatever it is. And it is kind of a mistake, but I don't think they understand that when they're doing it.
Well, it's an old sales theory, and you probably know it as well. It's the same kind of thing. Good salespeople will let the other person do 90% of talking, they'll do 10% of talking. And I contrast that. One time I bought a car. I knew exactly what I wanted. The salesperson wouldn't let me buy the car. He at the time had to do most of the talking. He had to show me, man, that I bought the car previously, so we bought the same exact car, and he had to show me every feature on it, everything on it. I said, leave me alone. I know what I want. Just let me
Right.
buy it. But he didn't get that concept.
No, no. Um, you know, back to the rewiring thing. I just want to address rewiring one more time because I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting time. Did your identity shift in any way? Did you find yourself going, wait a second, was there any discomfort in that move? Or was it just like, yay, this feels great?
Now, good question. Because again, I think the real key, and most people don't do this, is I thought a lot about it. And I knew exactly, I kind of had a blueprint and I knew what I wanted to do. So when I retired, it wasn't so much a shift. And one of the things I've been blessed with, Amanda, is to be able to do things I like and have jobs I like. So I never, really, except when I was a kid, and even then I could find things I enjoyed. I digress. But I never in my life did very few things that I didn't like to do. And when I was in that situation, I got out of it. So if
Okay.
I didn't enjoy working in a job only one or two times, I quit it, and did something else. So back to your question, the premise was that it was an adjustment, not too much. I've always been blessed also, almost all my entire life, I've had very few 9 to 5 jobs, so I didn't have to get up, I set my own hours for the most part and whatever I did. So teaching, and then when I taught, but my daughter never understood this, but when I taught, I would always have another job or two, and I would tell my daughter that, she'd say she couldn't get ahead. Well, get a second job, but I was always kind of busy. So even teaching, I'd be teaching a couple of places. I'd be working for the court system. I did lots of different things. So to stop doing that, it wasn't an adjustment because I just found other things to do, and so
Yeah. So that makes me think, Blaine, what were you like as a kid? What was your child like? Were you that kid that was always into something, always doing that? What were you like? What was your childhood?
I love your questions, Amanda.
Thank you.
It's not so much as a kid, but I remember my daughter, it would drive me crazy, Amanda, would say she was bored. And I said, in my life, I can honestly say that I don't think I've ever been bored. And
Yeah.
so, how can you be bored? So, as a kid, yeah, I was in lots of things. High school, I was in lots of activities. I was editor of the paper, I was in intramurals, and I was in charge of this and that. And so, I was always finding things, not finding, they just kind of found me, but I always would find things to keep me busy. As a young kid, I don't remember that as well, but as a kid, I was pretty always busy. But again, the key is doing stuff I liked. I think that's another key that wherever we do, if you don't like it, do something else.
100%. And even in work, like with entrepreneurs, I think if there's a piece of your work that you really hate, if you can find a way to outsource it.
Well,
Um,
you told me that, and I'll give a shout out to I have a producer helps me with my podcast. If you listen, Cappy, you can hear that we're going to mention you in a favorable light, but your point's well taken that I don't like doing some clerical kind of stuff. And, or making calls, or I'll use the system you shared with me, about using computerized stuff to make appointments.
yes.
But I'll
Yes.
call them out. I've always done that. I've always had maybe ahead of the game, but I've always had an assistant or somebody to help me in lots of different things because, again, I have a lot of details, and so it was sometimes helpful to have somebody else do that because I love doing that.
Yeah.
And if I can pay somebody else to do that and gives me the flexibility to do stuff I enjoy, that to
Yeah.
me is well worth it.
So you said that you were on the school paper.
Yeah.
When you were younger, is that what you wanted to, be when you grow up? What was it that you dreamed of?
Um, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, started as a journalism major. And I was always kind of grateful, especially nowadays, that I didn't go into that field, because journalism is a tough field to be in now. But yeah, so I wanted to be a journalism major, and I pursued that for a while. I did some writing, and did, some newspaper stuff and whatnot. But for some reason, I fell out of it, interest in that. All of a sudden then had a desire to be an arbitrator for Major League Baseball.
Oh, interesting.
And what's interesting on that, so I did a lot of research on it, and I found out I wasn't going to be an arbitrator for Major League Baseball because one, you have to be a lawyer, which I didn't want to be, and also you had to have contacts within the field. But interesting to that sort of was a hobby that became my part-time job. So I didn't become an arbitrator, but became a mediator. I also became an arbitrator, not for baseball, but for uh, stock market, for other industries as well. And so that's kind of became a hobby, if you would, that became a fairly lucrative job for me that I did when I wasn't teaching. It's that was interesting. I switched. I didn't become arbitrator for Major League Baseball, but I did a lot of dispute resolution work
Interesting.
through almost my whole working career. And for a long time, I was a mediator for the court system, and I really enjoyed that. I did it even when I was working at Bucks County Community College. That was just fascinating. But what was interesting about the question is if you can take a hobby or interest and either
Yeah.
expand upon it or make it grow, that's really kind of cool if you can do it. So I've tried to do that in my life as well.
Yeah.
For some reason, every kid, I guess, wants to be a baseball player. And so I didn't have the ability to do that. I just thought that would be a cool thing, Amanda, to make a decision whether somebody makes $2 million a year or $3 million a year.
Yeah.
So I didn't reach that level, but I did it. It was very interesting for the securities industry. I did it for construction. I did it lots of different fields, and I enjoyed it. So I did a lot of dispute resolution work, but the one thing I didn't like was when I did it for for the securities industry. And the reason I didn't do it, I was doing it when I was at Bucks County Community College on days I wasn't teaching. I had to go into Philly, so I'd have to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, work, do this arbitration for a full day, get home at 7 o'clock, get up the next morning, and I didn't enjoy that,
Yeah.
And I said to myself, self, this is not what I want to do for a long period of time. So I stopped that part of it, but did other things.
You know, that's interesting, Blaine, because not everybody does that. Some
Yeah,
people go along and just kind of we just don't like change. Even if we're in a situation that change is needed, it's not always easy. Where did that come from? I mean, this is interesting because I think you and I were taught like you get this one job and you work at this job all of your life and then you retire. Did were your parents in different jobs? Did they say, Blaine, do what you love? Like, where does this come from?
my father ran his own business, and he was the traditional, he had his own business, and he did it for most of his adult life. They were not necessarily on the same wavelength as I was. It's funny you asked that it was kind of destined that I was going to work in my father's business. I knew I didn't want to work in my father's business.
What was business?
It was in advertising and marketing.
Mm.
And for a variety of reasons, my brother was in the business as well. I knew I just didn't want to do it. So they never quite understood why I went to teaching, but I grew to love teaching. My mother was always disappointed. She wanted me to work in my father's business. And I just knew, Amanda, for lots of reasons, I didn't want to work in that business. And so I chose not to. And aside, one of my favorite stories I remember is as a kid, I'm working with my father and we're driving home one day, and my hair was a little long, not very long. And he says to me, get a haircut. I said, well, what if I don't want to get a haircut? He says, you won't work for me. So I said, okay, I didn't work for him.
Oh my gosh, what a character. Like
Yeah.
that is a strong independent streak.
Yeah, well,
You know?
in that sense, I was, but I just knew I didn't want to work for my father. I don't know about you, Amanda, but I don't like being told what to do. I love getting your opinion. I love getting others' opinions. And Kevin Jameson, he and I bounce stuff all the time. What I love about it is if I ask you for your opinion, I welcome it. But I kind of don't welcome when somebody tells me, do this. And, I try not to do that with my wife, with my daughter as well. But yeah, you bring back a memory that don't tell me what to do. I'll choose. So I chose to go into education. I chose to go into dispute resolution. I chose to have a webcast. I chose to write a blog. So it's always my choice
Yeah.
rather than somebody telling me I have to do this.
Yeah, I love that. I find it so interesting, the influence of our growing up and then what's just within us, and that kind of collaboration of your environment with who you actually just are, And I guess you're just a independent and curious person who has enough confidence to go with what he wants to do. And not everybody, we all don't like being told what to do, but we all don't have the confidence to pursue, our own dreams.
I never thought about it, but I think, yeah, that's sort of me to a T. That, again, I love getting opinions and I love getting ideas from people, but just don't tell me what to do, and
Right.
I'll make my own decision. And if somebody else tries to do it, it doesn't work.
Forget it. Okay, so this is a complete right turn, Blaine. I just like this question. If you could have a couple of hours with three people, and those three people could be alive, dead, people you know, people you don't, who would your three people be?
I can think of two right away. I can think of yeah, I can think of three, and unfortunately they're all dead. Three of them I knew somewhat. My first is my mentor was a guy by the name of Al Sternberg, and he was my teacher at Rider College and now Rider University. He got me into education. I just loved him, and it was so cool, Amanda. We stayed in touch 30 years after I graduated. He unfortunately passed a couple of years away, but he just meant so much in my life. He was just, and I just loved being with him. We spent a lot of time together. But he was one guy, a teacher. One of the things I encourage your listeners do, and some of my students do this as well. But keep in touch with people. Keep in touch with your teachers. Keep in touch with your mentors. Not enough people do, but it's kind of cool that I'm still in touch with a lot of my students. I just love it. Second one, it's funny, I come up with them right away, was another guy by the name of Murray Rayful, and he was he's a marketing guru, and he and I had a relationship for maybe 20, 30 years until he passed. But I read all his books, and what was so great about it, Amanda, is that after I read a book, I do this at times. I don't know if you do, but after I read a book and it makes a difference to me, I'll send the author a letter. And so it's so cool that Murray responded, and we had this 20-year relationship, and it was so exciting. He would invite me to hear him speak, and he once heard me speak, and it's just to keep in touch with him.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I just loved it. I got to know his family, and as you begin to say, I'm a big letter writer, and I said, "What makes a difference in your life? Send them a letter. You read a book, send them a letter, whatever." So Mary Rayful was the second one, and the third and final one was a guy by the name of Bill Veeck. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was a famous baseball executive, and when I was 10 years old, I remember I wrote him a letter, Bill Veeck, and he wrote me back. It was so exciting, and so we had then relationship for maybe about 10 years until he had the audacity to die. So he stopped writing me. I was so pissed
Yeah.
he didn't write me anymore. but it was so exciting. And then we never got to meet. We almost met, but he once had me meet one of his scouts at a baseball game, and they made me an honorary Chicago White Sox scout, all from a letter, all from just making a contact. But it's so nice that you develop relationships that way, and you
Yeah.
make contacts and meet people just by writing a letter, And so it's a great question. Those three come to mind, that the three people made a difference in my life, and they all did for different things. And I learned different things from each of them, and I still value it to this day.
Well, your letters must be really special because I have written letters to authors and I'm not friends with any of them.
Here, let me ask you, good for you. Do you get a response?
No, I mean, it's rare. It's
Okay.
rare.
So
Yes.
I find if I write a letter to an author, I'll get a response maybe about 50% of the time. Okay.
Wow.
Here's the key though. So when you read a book or you read an article or
Yes.
something, you send them an email.
Um, Different ways. So for example, one time I sent a direct message on Instagram. That was to Vivek Murthy after I read the book Together, which I think everybody needs to read, or I'll send it through LinkedIn. So I mean, it's a variety of ways.
Can I make a suggestion? Okay. And that's what I do. I try not to tell people. I'll ask.
No, no, yes, absolutely.
You'll increase your response dramatically. Is stop with Instagram, stop with the emails, send them a personal letter, send them a snail mail.
Okay.
You'll go, and it's so simple.
Yes.
At my consulting, I tell folks this. You'll go from maybe 5-10% response to probably 50% response.
I will circle back and I will let you know, Blaine. I think I'll try it. That's great.
But I will, because again, I'll ask you, how many emails do you get a day?
A lot.
Right, a lot. Isn't it powerful? How many snail mail letters do you get a day?
I mean,
Right. You,
right.
exactly. And how many then are handwritten, or typed or
Yeah,
whatever, but get not an advertising piece of mail. If you get one piece of mail a week, it's a lot.
that's true.
But those are your numbers. So if you get 500 pieces of email, 300 pieces of email a day, you get one snail mail. Will you open it? The answer is yes. So keep that in mind. Or anybody else,
Okay, that's great.
you want to reach somebody, try an old-fashioned letter. It works.
I love it. I think that's a great suggestion. Okay, so Blaine, you are such a joyful, positive person. I think you only need to meet you for 2 minutes before you know this is a positive person. And I'm going to ask you an unpositive question. So let's see. I don't know if you'll be able to do this, but what is a pet peeve? Do you have any pet peeves or like something that just really bothers you?
Yeah. I dislike, I'm trying to, how to express it.
Mhm.
Um, Even from a political standpoint, I dislike people making up stuff. That's definitely a pet peeve, and you can see it in politics in general. But I'll speak to anybody about anything, including politics. But don't make up stuff. Don't lie. Don't come up with conspiracy theories. Let's just talk
Yes.
about, I guess, so maybe the pet peeve is not telling the truth. If I ask a question, like you're asking questions, you want the truth, and I can deal with it. That's certainly a pet peeve. Just tell me the truth or don't lie to me. I guess
Yeah.
that's a really pet peeve. Uh, I realized it, but yeah, that sort of bothers me.
Yeah.
Um,
I
uh,
mean, I can see why it would. And I think so many, I'll leap off of your pet peeve and I'll ratchet your pet peeve up a notch by saying, I think sometimes it's a lack of investigation or research because sometimes somebody will take a bit of knowledge or something that's been out there in the world. We're all like on social media at this point and they believe it. So sometimes they're responding, they haven't kind of searched. And you studied journalism, I majored in journalism, and we were taught to keep investigating. So yeah.
it's funny you said that, because yeah, that's another thing I never thought about as pet peeve. But I also, at one time in my life, I wanted to be a librarian. So I worked at the college library, and so I didn't become a librarian, but I love research. I can find anything, almost anything. I'm really good at research. I can cut through stuff better than most people, I think. So that's a pet peeve, that that you tell me something, and it's not based on research, or it's based on garbage, or that's obvious garbage. So it's a shame politics has brought that out. It doesn't have to. I love discussing politics, but let's base it on truth, fact, whatnot. Let's base it on research. And I can disagree with you, but back it up with something, not something that's a conspiracy theory or you can obviously disprove. But that's up there with the pet peeves.
Yeah.
So
And we can say this thing that people really hate to say, and we have the power to say it. You can actually say, I don't know. I would have to look into that. And I think we live in a world where people just don't want to say that, but we can't know everything. And sometimes we kind of in a discussion can say, gosh, I don't know.
you know,
I'm
or,
not sure.
or I have to think more about it or research it or something.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we do have that power, but um so Blaine, I just want to ask, I have a website called Soulful Living, but in your life, in Blaine's world, what do you think soulful living looks like for you?
I guess being as often as I can, being true to myself and based on what I do, on what my gut tells me, and my gut is often, it's back to your point. I think my gut is often true, and I follow my gut, not all the time. I should, but when I don't, then I'm not living. I'll use the expression soulful living. It's just kind of I'm living existence rather than a thought out existence. So that soulful living is just things that almost everything we talked about tonight is are things that feed my soul, or things that I enjoy, or that I can help others enjoy, and that feeds my soul. I guess I never thought of it in those terms, but that's what soulful living is living life that gives me joy and gives others joy. And I'll just add to that, my wife and I'll mention Cynthia, my beautiful bride, as I call her. When we got married, we developed a mantra, and she's more into spiritualism than I am. But our mantra is we want three things in our life. We want love, we want joy, and we want ease, So if I can have those three things, to me, I'm living, at least for me, it's a soulful existence. If I get those three things in my life, that's what I try to strive for.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, it works, but at least for the most part.
Blaine, thank you so much. Thanks for the work you do with Blaine's World, the newsletters, which are just such a light. They're joyful and they're, a bit of good news, which we all can use right now. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and I appreciate you, and it's so cool that we met. And then just again, what's I enjoy about it is starting to exchange ideas and thoughts and people we know, and that's just kind of a fun thing. At least for me, it has been. So thank you.
And for me too. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for being a valued part of the Soulful community. Thank you to William Aronson for writing, recording, and producing the SolFul Connections theme song. And finally, always know you're not alone. We are connected. We're all in this thing together, and you and your story are important. Let's just keep on connecting.